Have you ever wondered what the single most handed question is that will start a debate that will last for generations to come and you will never get a clear-cut answer? It's a very simple question. Hey, what's the best shock for my Jeep? Well, there you go. This debate can go on for the rest of your lives and you will never get a clear-cut answer. So my clear-cut answer is, what's the best shock for your Jeep? Whatever you choose to buy, period. Don't take my opinion. Don't take somebody else's opinion. Do your research, look at the manufacturers, talk to them, and decide what is the best shock for your Jeep for what you do with it. There you go. That's the best shock for your Jeep. So, if you've watched the previous videos, and I hope you have, and if you haven't, please take the time to do so. We'd love to have you on board as a subscriber. You'll know that we had a slight altercation out at Mason, Texas at Wolf Caves, and well, the shock lost. So when it came time to buy shocks for the Jeep, we decided to go ahead and, well, we might as well go for it, right? Let's get some good quality shock absorbers. We currently run the Bilsteins, and I definitely would not knock them as they are a great shock for a cheap shock, okay? So it's not that they're bad, but they're probably not nowhere near the best out there, and we certainly could not go with the best out there. But when it came time for shocks, I did the same thing. I started reaching out to manufacturers. I talked to them. I looked for other people's input, not for their opinions, just for their input. And we ultimately decided on a particular shock absorber. And the reason why was when I started reaching out to the manufacturers, and look, we talked to Fox, which is an absolutely fantastic shock. Guys, there's reason why thousands of people run those shock absorbers. They are a great shock. They work really well, okay? We reached out to Fox. I did like the Falcons, the SP3s, and I was looking for more input on those, so I reached out to a couple of pretty significant YouTube channels. One of them is a very big contender in the JK side of Jeeps. We got no response. I understand that these people are very busy, right? But I don't ever want to lose and feel disconnected with the people that watch my videos. So if you have a question or a comment, please reach out to us and I will get back to you, okay? I know their channels get so big that they don't have time to do that, but that's a flaw. I don't ever want to feel disconnected from you guys. So again, we got no response back from them at all, so I was really troubled with making the decision to go to the Falcons. Now, one of the guys in our club runs the Falcons, and they are a truly fantastic looking shock. Very robust, thick, and so far he loves them. So we'll see as time goes by, and I will include his opinions on what he thinks about his shocks in some upcoming videos, just so we can share that information. But we looked at Old Man Emu, Fox, Terraflex, Vertex, pretty much any and all of them. And I ended up reaching out to a manufacturer, EVO Manufacturing. The second the gentleman got on the phone with me, I felt like I had known him all my life. He sat there and he talked to me about my Jeep, not about the crazy unlimited budget build Jeeps. No, he talked to me about my Jeep, what we do with it and how we drive it and what it's for. And he was actually quite amazed that my JK is not my daily driver, which it's not. So he made a recommendation on what he thought we should get and how it should be set up as far as compression and rebounding, because again, shock technology, no disrespect here, but most of us have not a clue in the world how shocks actually work and what they do and how hard they work. So by the end of the conversation, I don't know if I was more lost or more in tune with what was going on within my shock absorber, but he explained everything to me, why he thought we should run a particular type of valving for compression and rebound, and ultimately I ended up contacting the actual manufacturer that builds their shock absorbers and talked to them as well, and we made the decision and we went with the EVO Manufacturing shocks strictly because of how well they treated us and how well they explained to us how the shocks work and what they do for us. So we're going to get the camera spun around here and I'm going to show you what we got. And well, there they are. Yes, we went with the Kings, and let me show you what's in the box here. Let's get on over here. So there they are. King remote reservoir, 2.5 inch length is you know, for our particular lift on our Jeep. And as soon as you take them out of the box, man, and you actually like put these things in your hand, which I don't know, man, you'll understand why they are truly a phenomenal shock absorber. So it is a full 0.750 3/4 inch shaft. We actually mic'd it, and it is a true 750. Just the end bushings here alone are crazy on how well they're built. I mean, the welding is phenomenal. The sealed bearing that's in there, I mean, this thing is massive. I mean, I know we have no comparison here, but but just the size of the end compared to the hand here, I mean, it is a fantastic looking shock absorber. All extremely high pressure hoses here, which I use a lot of this hose in the industry that I work in. I mean, it's some awesome stuff. But there they are. Anyways, EVO Manufacturing, spec'd out for our Jeep. And I mean, even the hardware that they send, guys, look at this stuff. I mean, this is the washer for the top of the shock. It is completely machined out of billet stock. It's amazing. And then the bushings, I mean, they're not poly. They are rubber, but man, they are stiff. There's going to be no give in there, no rubber bushing to sit there and get all spongy. I mean, your shock absorber is going to do the work and not the bushing, which is fantastic. They are specific to which side they go on. So we do have a left shock and a right shock, and we got them all the way around. So we do have the back ones as well. I'll show that to you later in the video. This video is not meant to be a how-to to put shocks in your Jeep. I mean, surely, guys, come on. You know how to install shocks on your Jeep. Our Jeep is a little bit more of a pain in the butt due to the kind of inner fenders that I have. So I actually have to take off my tubular fenders to get my inner fenders out so that I can get up in there to the shock. And and yes, we did learn from a few videos back, we no longer use just a floor jack. Nothing happened to us. I just watched the video and I was like, man, you're stupid. So jack stands now. We won't do that again. So we're going to get these old shocks out of here, and we're going to get the new Kings installed, and we're going to see how they look. Now, this will be a lengthy series, so later on down the road, this video is actually pretty current. So here in the next 2 weeks, second week of March 2022, we are going to be headed up to Tennessee to Windrock. And we'll put them to the test and see how they ride and how they feel, and we'll get back to you. We'll keep you informed as the videos go on about how they work. We finally got our long lines installed, and big bore master cylinder on the brakes. We have the big brake kits all the way around now. So anyways, like I say, it's not meant to be a how-to. You should know how to change shocks. There's one bolt on the bottom. There's one nut on the top. Take the shock out. Can't get no harder than that. Same thing on the back. There's a bolt on the bottom. 2 bolts on the top, take them out, change the shock. So we're not going to make a how-to. We're just going to show you what we come across as we install them, and we'll show you what they look like. Okay, so like I said, not necessarily meant to be a how-to video. Again, it's a front shock. There's just a single nut on the top. We're not going to talk about sizes because different manufacturers use a different size nut. And then on the bottom down there, there's just a single bolt and nut that goes through the bottom. Now, those are generally going to be 18 millimeter on the bolt and 18 millimeter on the nut because you generally reuse the stock hardware. But anyway, let's get this thing out of here, and we'll get the new King stuck up in there. There you go. And we're not going to get rid of these because they are still good. I mean, we have 3 out of 4 left, right? So, I mean, worst comes worst, we do have a trail spare to get us back or wherever we're at. Now, on my Jeep, I do run the upper relocation brackets to get the shock out a little bit from the lift kit. So, since we got everything out of there, prime time to check those bolts. Okay, so there it is, all mounted in there. Like I say, the hardest part about this thing in our Jeep is just getting the stupid inner fenders out. But, The King shock actually comes with a 3/4 inch nylock nut for the top, whereas the Bilstein was like 5/8. So it's significantly larger. And then, like I say, the bottom just reuses the stock hardware, 18 millimeter bolt with an 18 millimeter nut on it. And the only thing else that I would share is, keep in mind, when you tighten this nut up, okay, you're not looking to squish the crap out of those bushings, all right? It's just enough to take up the slack for the shock mounting plate. And when you get it tight with that nylock nut on there, there shouldn't be but about 1/8 of an inch of thread showing through the nut. All right, if you over tighten it, you'll just squish the bushing out of there and it will just tear itself to pieces. But we're gonna get the inner fender put back on, move on to the other side, repeat, eat, sleep, and then we'll move on to the back. I will add this little quick note though. So the Bilsteins that we had on here were ordered with the lift kit for that specific amount of lift. So they should have been sized properly for the springs, the control arms, such forth. I noticed after we put the Kings on here that are actually spec'd out for our lift kit that we have significantly more travel now. I don't know what the deal is with that. I'm beginning to think really that the Bilsteins were too short. Now that's something that you need to check, okay? So I'm gonna show you over here on the other side. We're fixing to change this one. But you need to make sure, and this is me included, because most of us use multiple different manufacturers, right? We may use a rock crawler spring or a Terraflex arm or whatever, okay? When you put your shocks on there though, you need to make sure that your shocks, your springs, your lift kit, everything is sized accordingly to each other. If you get those shocks too long and your springs aren't capable of it, and on our particular setup like this with a stock JK basically, you get that thing stretched out there, these springs will actually come loose and them son of guns will pop out. All right, so you don't want to use too long a shock. Vice versa, you don't want to use too short of a shock. Every time you go up over an obstacle or whatever, that shock is just constantly bam, bam, bottoming out because it needs more travel and it is too short. So just spec your shocks carefully with the equipment that you have on your Jeep, even if it's multiple different manufacturers, doesn't make a difference. Just make sure they're sized accordingly to your lift so that they'll all work in conjunction. Okay, so we got the inner fender out and I was gonna share this with you. That's why you don't over tighten your bushings, all right? There's way too much thread showing and you see what's happened to the upper bushing. I'm not gonna blame the installer, but this is why we do our own work now. The installer did a great job, not gonna complain about it, but they just didn't pay enough attention to what they were doing on the shocks and they just over tightened them. And those bushings just will not last once they've been over tightened. It will squish them dudes right out of there. So that's what I'm saying. You got to pay attention when you go to tighten that bushing down. All you're trying to do is just get the slack taken up out of there. And there shouldn't be but about 1/8 of an inch of thread showing. But anyway, we're going to get the other one slapped in here right quick and be on the way. So moving on to the rears. Again, the shocks are just absolutely incredibly robust. That same big old 3/4 inch shaft. The ends, I mean, actually in reality, the shock looks absolutely identical to the front one with the exception of the end cap, which I don't know for sure, but I'm going to safely assume that they probably use all the same components and then they can just change these for whatever application they're going to be on. And in our particular application being a stock JK, they actually send the adapter here that fits on the top here so that it'll just bolt right into the factory mounts, without having to do any modifications. This plate is offset. One side has a longer ear than the other. It's in the instructions. It explains exactly how it's supposed to go on there so to clear all your factory JK stuff. But they are pretty incredible. So far, highly impressive with the construction and everything like that. But anyways, we're going to move on and get the back ones put on. Okay, so we got the shock out. And, of course, something just doesn't look right here. But the new one went right in without a hitch. I figured there would be no problems. But on the back, we can actually talk about mounting hardware because it literally reuses the factory mounting hardware. So all you need is an 18mm socket, 18mm wrench. You can zip the bottoms out. And on the top up in here, we'll get up in there. And you can see up there, it's just a 15mm socket to get the factory bolts out. And then, of course, it does have an adapter plate for the King shocks. So that is a little tricky. When you go to stick these up in there, the adapter plate has to be on the end of the shock. Okay, because you cannot get the through bolt in there once it's up there. So just leave the nut and the washer off. Stick it up there. You can slide the bolt back. You can get the factory hardware in there. And then you can move the bolt back and forth. Once you get those tightened up, then you just put the bolt back through it completely, put the nut and washer back on it, tighten it up. Okay, they go in without a hitch. Couple of things though, actually to keep in mind is on a factory JK, as in like factory rear sway bars and stuff, your factory sway bar is right here, and it will run across it right through here.
So that is a pretty tight clearance in there. You have to be kind of conscious of that. But we do not run factory rear sway bars, as I have the anti-rocks installed. So that's not an issue because it actually relocates the sway bar up over the top of the frame and then behind all the muffler and everything. But they literally went in without a hitch. There was nothing to it. The other thing you need to keep in mind, and it's in the instructions too, but it's just stuff you should be conscious of, is when you do run a lift kit, and most of us do, obviously, you run a track bar relocation bracket where it actually raises the track bar up. So you have to be kind of conscious of this clearance between the shock and the relocation bracket. So you just want to check and make sure that when the suspension is fully down and fully up, that there's not any issues with that contacting the relocation bracket. And as you can see, there is plenty of clearance. We're fully depressed right now. So we're gonna let it all the way down, and then we'll take a look at that also just to make sure that there's no issues. Well, there you go. As you can see, we have plenty of down travel, plenty of up travel on the track bar relocation bracket where we don't interfere with the shock at all. Great. But there is another thing that we need to consider though. When we jacked the rear end up, we still have the springs in here, okay? So when we actually jacked the rear end up, we were just taking the weight and putting it back on the spring until we just started to lift the body. So we didn't have a true full up travel. So what we need to be careful of is we need to make sure that our bump stops are correct for the amount of spring travel and shock compression that we actually truly have now, okay? I don't know a better way to do it. Maybe somebody else does, but the way we're going to do it is I can actually get the fully compressed dimension of the spring from our manufacturer. And since it's super easy, I'm just going to let the rear end back down. I'm going to take the springs back out, and we're going to jack it back up till we get to the minimum spring compression height or our minimum shock height, which hopefully should come out to be pretty darn close to each other. And then what we want to do is we want to measure for the correct amount of bump stop. Because the idea here is, that didn't sound right, did it? But the idea is we do not want to compress that shock to its full minimum before we contact the bump stop. And again, vice versa, we don't want to have so much clearance in the bump stop that we end up actually compressing the shock fully. So we're going to pay careful attention to that. We're actually going to measure it. And again, it's all about knowing how to properly size the shock for the Jeep with what you have. And it will pretty much work with any combination of spring and such forth, as long as your shock is made for that correct amount of travel. So that's it. Like I say, it was pretty easy. We're going to chunk the other one in here and be on our way. And well, there it is. All four corners done. We got all the tires back on there, sitting on the ground. The install really is simple, honestly, man. I mean, there's nothing complicated about it. Like I say, in our particular situation, it's only because of the front inner fenders that made it hard at all. But the quality of these things, the fit is incredible. And the instructions are very, very detailed. There's nothing to miss. They explain everything thoroughly. And only time will tell now. So, like I say, we're headed out to Windrock here very soon. We'll be riding the Badge of Honor trails. And we'll see how they feel. I mean, for us, they're going to feel like awesome because of what we had before. But we'll see how they do in the long term. And we will keep you guys posted as we go. Because remember, we still have a long, long way to go. See you guys.